Greetings and salutations. This is Abdelhadi with The Bitter Truth, where we may not have all the answers, but we're going to ask an awful lot of questions today. In addition to all of that, let me get a little housekeeping out of the way. You can become a bitter pill by joining patreon.com/The Bitter Truth, or you could listen to us absolutely for free on all the usual suspects, Stitchers, iTunes, and all that kind of stuff. Today, my guest is a small businessman, entrepreneur, traveler, just been all over the place, has had a very storied life and career. My guest today is Mike Melia. I've known Mike for a long time, and he's in town for a little bit, and we got together over the weekend and thought, hey, listen, let's have a conversation and talk about some stuff that I definitely don't know about, because Mike's seen everything from the Beatles at Shea Stadium to the most recent events of today. So, Mike, how are you, man?
Abe, I'm doing great, thanks, and thanks for having me. I appreciate it, and I've been looking forward to this possibility.
Awesome, man. I'm glad. So let's chat a little bit. So, and not to get too into the weeds on everything, but how did you get to here? Where's your background? Like, where you came from?
All right. Well, how did I get to Austin itself? Austin's always been one of my favorite places, one of my favorite towns. First time I came here was in the winter of 1978 to 79. And interestingly enough, at the time, I was in the natural food business. I had started a natural food store on the North Shore of Long Island in 1976, the same year my son was born, my oldest child. And the major reason I started that business was all of a sudden I was having a kid, and now I was have to figure out a way of working all the time and having money coming on a steady basis. And I didn't particularly like the idea of taking orders from somebody else. Although I was married at the time, so I guess I...
Yeah, your own CEO in the house.
Yeah, right. But anyway, we were on a road trip. It was our first road trip in a couple of years since we started the business. And in those days, we were sort of hippies. So when you took a vacation, you didn't take a 2-week vacation or a long weekend. You went for a month or two. So we did a road trip all across the country in a Honda station wagon, a CBCC, with a 3-month-old baby and a 2.5-year-old child. And my wife and I, and we camped all across the place. But we came here, and what we did when we were here was, interestingly enough, there was a small natural food restaurant that had just opened up. Since we were into natural foods, we found it. It was in a house somewhere around here, and it was named Whole Foods. Wow. It was before Whole Foods was what we've learned it is today. Yeah. And we had started Rising Tide Natural Foods back in 76, like I said. And the purpose, our purpose there was to educate people into eating better. Right. That basically, my personal opinion was that the modern American diet back in the 70s was essentially a big experiment, because we'd changed so much. We were eating frozen foods all the time, right. Canned foods. We were shipping in exotic fruits and all kinds of stuff. And so we were more of a stay local type of philosophy. But we opened a store in 76. That store is still there 42 and a half years later.
Oh, shit.
Yeah.
Okay.
And my old business partner, guy I ran track with in high school, runs it. So it's fun. And when I go back there, I feel like a great-grandfather now, right?
Right.
But I've been gone literally since the early 80s. After I left the natural food business, my first wife and I got divorced. And I was happy to get out of the food business. It was like, in the beginning, the way I joke about it was we were visionaries.
Right.
But after about 5 years and we were successful, I was a grocery clerk. That's what I bought.
Showed up and yeah.
That's what that's what I bought in. If we were successful, I'd get to order groceries for the rest of my life. So I wanted out of that, and I didn't know what to do. One of my buddies, in fact, the guy who was my business partner, had taken this personal development seminar called Relationships. It was sort of an S-style workshop. He recommended I take it. I was like, that's for you. That's for you guys that don't have it together. That was my arrogant stance as a 30-year-old. Sure. But I went and took this seminar after some insistence, and I'm sitting in the back of the room, and I'm not knowing what I'm going to do next, and I'm looking. There's 200 people in the seminar. They all paid $200 each. That's $40,000. These people look like they're having fun leading the seminar. And that was the beginning of my entree into public speaking.
Sure.
Yeah,
man.
Yeah.
Well, so you're born in New York?
Born in New York.
Right, and you came up in the 60s, right? So,
yeah.
and obviously, and because, we got a little ahead of the curve, because then we got into the 70s, you're married with a kid, natural food business.
Right.
But, how was it coming up in the 60s, being in junior high, high school, and, just all the stuff that was changing. I mean, that decade was definitely not the 50s.
Yeah. When we, have you ever seen Born on the 4th of July, the Ron Kovic story?
Yeah.
When he opens up that story, they show their lives in suburban America, riding their bicycles from the 4th of July parade and Memorial Day parade. And, my dad was a World War II vet. He had been a sailor and had been in the Navy. And so, we were Cub Scouts, Boy Scouts. Everything was rah-rah, red, white, and blue until all of a sudden, I was probably 14, 15 when John Lennon, who was one of my heroes, started coming out against the war. And I thought, whoa, what's going on here?
Right.
I didn't really pay that close attention to current events at that point.
Sure.
I was 13, 14 years old. I was playing sports, running track, trying to get good grades. And, the news was on at 11 o'clock at night.
That's right.
We didn't have what we have today. So you didn't know that much. And then I started educating myself a little bit.
Right.
And it was pretty interesting.
Yeah.
One of the funny stories in my personal education was that I went to a Catholic high school, a co-ed school, and my social studies teacher appointed me in the end of my junior year to a debate, and I had to represent the Viet Cong.
Oh, shit.
In the debate. And what did I know, right?
Right.
And so one of my buddies, their older brother, had gone to Nam, and he'd come home, and now this guy he'd pick us up after track practice sometimes, and he had long hair and was a little rough around the edges and stuff. But I said to him, his name was Ray. I said, Ray, I got to do this. I got to do this debate, and I don't know anything about this stuff. I mean, where would I gather information? And he sent me off to every Wednesday night in Garden City. There were a whole bunch of the anti-war factions gathered together to give information to young people that were attempting to get out of the draft.
Oh, man.
And so I went there and I gathered all this information. And I had information from the Black Panthers, information from the Socialist Club, information, it was a whole mix of it. And so I put together a whole debate. And I wound up winning the debate, which was not a very popular debate
subject.
to win.
Yeah, no kidding.
At that point in time. But I just out-prepared the other guy.
Right.
He thought he could just roll in and say, we're America, we can do whatever we want.
Patriotism and all that shit. Well, let me ask you something. So, at that time, that kind of information you're looking at as a kid, did you get anything like on the Gulf of Tonkin at that time? Was that stuff? Because I was like 6 when the Beatles broke up, so I don't have any perspective until I got to college.
The Gulf of Tonkin there was no like, oh, it was a false flag. It was the real reason.
The real reason.
I mean, that's the way it seemed to us. It was the real reason. And you didn't get too much. The interesting, like the things that came out, like I was as a kid, I delivered the New York Daily News.
Okay.
Now we were in the suburbs, and the New York Daily News was a morning paper. So I was up at every day 5 o'clock, getting my papers ready, then go around and delivering the papers.
Sure.
And that was sort of my biggest connection to breaking news. Like, for example, when Richard Speck killed the nurses in Chicago, that was on the headline.
Right.
So it's just me and those headlines at 5 o'clock in the morning.
Wow.
A little scary. When the picture from My Live with the one picture where the soldiers shooting the guy in the head, that was on the front cover of the Daily News.
Sure.
So this is the way we started, recognizing something was not right.
Yeah.
And and so then. Interestingly enough, I was a jock, so it wasn't it was a jock. It wasn't popular to be anti-war or peacenik or anything like that.
Absolutely.
So, in our senior year, now in my junior year, between my junior year and my senior year, Woodstock happened.
Right.
And so me and my best buddy went to Woodstock. We bamboozled my mom, basically told her, oh, it's going to be 3 days of folk music and camping. What could go wrong?
The Kingsman Trio is going to be there. Andy, what's his face? Andy, I forgot the name of the guy. The crooner guy with the smooth hair. Anyway, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah. So we managed to do that, and that was completely mind altering because, we were straight, jock. My buddy was a baseball player. I ran track. We knew some kids in the school that started smoking pot like that, but in those days, we're talking 1969. Your older brothers and sisters were like they were all straight-laced.
Right.
So when you were like starting to experiment, there was no wisdom from the ages coming down. You had to figure it out for yourself.
That's right. That's right.
And so, but that right after Woodstock blew my mind because, Country Joe was there with his fist cheer and, against the war and the people were obviously, for peace and stuff like that. So that fall, there was a big moratorium march, and all across the United States, high schools were participating. It was the first time high schools were participating in peace marches, and we went to a Catholic school, so there were some of the younger teachers in our school who were very much part of the anti-war movement at that time.
Yeah.
So we had the option to go out and march around the school. And I remember I stayed there and I was in favor of the march, but I wouldn't go into the march because I had a reputation as a jock to a pole.
Right. Well, okay, so and I'm behind you. So like I got out of high school in '81, for example, right? So by the time I was coming up, and I ran track, right? But it was kind of mixed at that point because you had guys that dug punk and stuff that were running track too, or they had their hair long, they're doing ponytails and everything else.
Yeah.
And so, but you still kind of towed that line because you didn't know any better.
Yeah. Well, like it was our senior year that we started both smoking pot and growing our hair long, and and long hair then wasn't what we would call long hair today. It was just over your ears a little bit, or a little shaggy. And stuff.
But it wasn't a crew cut.
Right.
Yeah.
But my athletic coach told me he came into our track meeting, and he was not a track coach. He was the baseball coach, but he was the athletic director. He came into our track meeting the day before our biggest meet of the year and singled me out and said if I didn't get a haircut tonight, I shouldn't show up for the meet tomorrow, which was a championship meet.
Shit.
Yeah, so that was pretty intense.
Did you end up cutting your hair?
I went and got a trim.
Yeah, man. Hey, listen, I get it.
He didn't believe I'd gotten anything cut, but I had.
Yeah.
I had the receipt from the barber.
You're like George Harrison. When did you have a haircut? I had one yesterday.
Right.
Well, shit, man. So so you're about 18 or so, like 70, 71.
Yeah, I graduated high school in 70. Okay. So I was 18 then, and and of course, by then, what you had coming out of when the Beatles first came, it was crazy. It was all of a sudden a whole different thing. Well, then the Stones came right on their heels, right. And then the Kinks came right on their heels. And those are the three bands that had come from England that just stopped my world.
Sure.
And it was funny. My dad was a New York City firefighter, and he had just gotten promoted to chief, and he was on a temporary assignment. He was assigned to go check out Forest Hills Tennis Stadium because there was a rock and roll concert there, and the people were coming out of their seats and filling the aisles, and it was the Rolling Stones. Oh, he comes back and says to me, "Now, the Beatles are sort of grown on me, but you don't like these guys, do you?" I go, "What do you mean?" He goes, "Well, they wear sweatshirts, and blue jeans. I mean, in those days when you got on a concert stage, everyone dressed, suits and everything.
Right.
So he felt like they were really just dirty and grimy.
That's well, it was kind of like that, wasn't it? The Beatles versus Stones. So, the clean cut, squeaky clean guys compared to the bad boy, Keith Richards and those guys, right?
And it was pretty much like that.
It was like two different camps almost, right? Like you couldn't like one and not like the other kind of deal, right?
Well, you could like them both. I mean, most of us did. We weren't maybe I don't know how people were that way, but I was never that way. I mean, we wanted it. Like if we had a chance to see the Stones,
fuck yeah,
all over that.
I saw them 3 times, but it wasn't in 1960 anything.
Yeah.
I saw them in '81 actually, where Prince got shit thrown at him.
Oh,
because some genius
I heard about that concert.
Yeah, it was LA Coliseum, and some genius came up with the idea of getting Prince to open for Jay Giles and the Rolling Stones, and this is when he was first getting started. And he didn't know his audience, I don't think, because he came out in panties and high boots and a trench coat. And he was a good guitar player, but they're throwing, I remember seeing one guy throw a shoe at him. And it's like 4 PM. I'm thinking, you threw a shoe at him. You don't have a shoe now. Are you that mad that you're willing to not have a shoe? You got to walk around without a shoe. But anyway, man.
We saw some of my buddies were Leon Russell fans, and we were going to college upstate New York, and they were going down to this concert, and me and my other buddy they left without us, and they already had tickets, and we didn't. It was a Friday night, so we decided to hitchhike down there, and we get to the Fillmore East at about 9 o'clock at night. They had an early show at 8:30, and then had a late show at 11:30. So we go to the box office, and they had just released press tickets for the 11:30 show.
Wow.
So our friends had sent away for tickets the first day they were available, and they were sitting in the first row, 5 of our buddies. We wound up sitting right next to them.
Wow.
And a band named McKendree Springs opened up, and then the second band, this guy comes out there, and he's all in a cape and shaggy hair, and we're thinking, this is like one of those guys from Britain, who knows? And it was Elton John.
Wow.
And so we saw Elton John's maybe his second or third American concert.
Wow.
And it was like, and we didn't know who he was.
Yeah, man. Yeah.
As soon as he started playing the piano, everything else, his looks were forgiven.
Yeah,
Like,
100%.
we didn't care what he was wearing.
Now because you look at how he plays piano. It's like Jerry Lee Lewis. It's like he plays it like a bongo. He plays the shit out of it, and it's not like this pretty stuff. It's like
Right.
yeah.
Oh, he can play the pretty stuff, but he kills it too.
He crushes it, man.
And of course, Leon Russell was a master.
Absolutely, man. Well, so like and honestly, just preface some of these questions with just this is my opinion. I think that anybody that, for example, got out of the war did it conscientiously. And later, when I see these hawks come on that didn't fight in the war, the brave thing to say would be, yeah, you know what? Like Bill Clinton. He got out of it and he tried to dance around that. I'm like, you know what, dude? Why don't you just say what it was?
Right.
You didn't believe it was just. You didn't believe it was right, and you thought, I'm not going to do it.
Right.
And it's not disparaging the troops. It's not but it's disparaging the government that uses those guys as a first resort versus a last resort. So all that to say that's kind of what my attitude is about Vietnam. So or any war. I mean, shit, we've been doing this shit for 7 years at least now.
Oh yeah.
But so like when did they try to draft you or?
Yeah. So I have So when I went to college, I only went this one semester. I went to SUNY Binghamton, New York, and one of my suite mates was this guy Danny, and Danny and I would stay up really late, and we both agreed that our educational system had a lot of holes in it.
Sure.
That they'd been conditioning us for years and years.
Oh, yeah.
And I really came to the opinion of the only way I'm going to sort of break out of the cycle of this conditioning is to step away from it all. Mm-hmm. And again, of course, Timmy Leary was saying, turn on, tune in, and drop out.
Right.
In a way, it was sort of like that, but I was just going to step back, and my buddy and I were going to drop out of college and go to Europe. Well, then he backed out of dropping out because he is a scientist. Oh. And he realized that he really needed college education to do his science. He was an early in computer sciences. The guy's a genius today. Teaches at a university somewhere on Vancouver Island.
Wow,
great guy, really good guy. But at that point in time, we had this little campaign and it was sort of simple, but it was like, let's not put up with any more BS.
Right.
And so I started using that as my principle of and so I basically decided I would drop out of school. And then when I did, I was eligible for the draft. Right. And now as soon as I decided to drop out of school, I applied for status as a conscientious objector.
Okay.
And because I felt like, you know what, I'm not, and I really had over the last couple of years become a pacifist.
Right.
And really one of the books that had a great impact on me reading was Joan Baez's Daybreak. Okay. And it's a small little booklet, but it really expresses why she became a pacifist. And being a pacifist is a little different than being an anti-war activist. Right. In that you really are saying there needs to be a philosophical change in how we deal with conflict in our world. Sure. And that is we don't go off and kill each other about it all the time.
Well, right. Well, and this is the thing is I guess principally, I wouldn't say I'm a pacifist in that if we're being attacked, the key word is if. Mm-hmm. If something's, like somebody's in Canada or they're coming, some shit like that. But we haven't been attacked in a long fucking time. And we haven't entered into a war with just cause unless we lied about it for a long fucking time. And, the Mueller report just came out, right? And everyone's like, trying to, double back and do this whole dance and, well, at least we got some tax money out of it. Fuck you. That was not what it was about. It was about investigating for quote unquote collusion. And we were getting ready to saber rattle a nuclear power over a lie. Mm-hmm. Right. And so you look at the Gulf, you look at Korea, Gulf of Tonkin, Iraq twice, Afghanistan. So it's like all these things where, it's like, what is a hero? Right. It's like you guys are questioning the war and you don't have to be like a total war hawk to understand that, we don't need war. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean?
All right.
I'm not saying that correctly as much as I want to, but my point is just that, it's not that we're never going to have a problem. But we create these problems, and every country we've touched over the last 7 years has turned to shit. We've created nothing but failed states. We've between Korea and Vietnam, we've killed 6 million people. That's the magic number because that's how many Jews Hitler killed. So how are we any better when we killed 6 million civilians?
Yeah, no, I mean we have our what's going on, I believe, in this country, and like after Vietnam, the first 4 or 5 years, we were really looking at what do we need to do differently, and then when Carter got pushed out and Reagan came in, we stopped looking at any of that. We just reprogrammed we reprogrammed the narrative. How do we 100%. And we justified going into Grenada, and we just I mean, it was crazy. Panama, right?
Size of goddamn Austin, by the way.
Right. I mean, and so all this kind of stuff was crazy. Yeah. But I think what you go back to a lot of that, like, and nowadays, one of the great things I believe is that there's so much documentation out there.
Sure.
That you can go to YouTube or Wikipedia and do a day-long search on something, anything, and you can really get behind and see what was really going on there. Like I watched Ken Burns' Vietnam.
Oh my God, yeah.
And it was really tough to watch. It was tough to watch. I lost a few friends there, and my older sister, lost her first real boyfriend. And he was 2 weeks away from coming home on his second deployment, and he died. And it was so sad, and it was so hard to talk to her about it on a personal basis. She was like a freshman I was a senior in high school. She was a freshman in college. Right. And it was just hard to really be there for her because none of us dealt with death. We didn't know anything about that, Right. But I think the Vietnam War, obviously in those days, there's a whole lot of stuff that happened in the 60s, like that are worth really people looking back at, like the free speech movement that was born on the Berkeley campus in the early 60s. Major big, because that came together with the civil rights movement, came together with the anti-war movement, and so there were, it was interesting. There was lots of times there. It was a lot of fun.
Sure.
Like, for example, you go to Washington to march, and I used to go to when I go there, I would always find out where the Vietnam vets against the war were, because they were always had the most fun. Yeah. Nobody would mess with them. Right. They had the best marijuana. So I would just go and hang out with those guys, and it would make the whole day. But that was, so in the combination of being in the natural food industry at that time and being also then against, I just got into that and also being against the war. I got into the natural food business, and for those years, I think, almost from 76 to 85, I had 4 kids. Okay. I've been married twice, had 3 kids in the first marriage, 1 kid in the second. And what happens when you have kids like that and you're raising them, you're somehow removed from reality.
Sure.
Because, now like a whole part of your time, your usage of your time is watching out for those kids, sure, hanging out with those kids when you're not working. Right. And so I would go from work to the kids, and so there's almost like a big cultural. Like, I can't tell you what bands came out in those years, right? But up until then, it's like it was like I remember when Blondie and Elvis Costello both came out right around the same time, at least in my brain.
Kids.
And then the kids came. And I knew the Ramones. I had a friend of mine who was an early adapter to the punk. He was a really funny guy.
You woke up and hair metal happened. That must have been a rude awakening.
Well, yeah, that was pretty funny. So I lived on Long Island. I lived near the beach in Long Beach, and there was a deli around the corner from my house where these 4 guys worked. And unbeknownst to me, they were part of a Kiss cover band.
Oh wow! And
so one morning, I got up early, and I went over. They usually were opened at 6:30, the deli, and I went to get coffee, and they weren't open. I'm like, holy mackerel, nobody's here. Then about 6:35, this van comes screeching up. And these 4 guys, who I know all of them, but I don't know them as a Kiss cover band, they come out still decked out in their stuff. They've been on the road all night,
wow, getting
back from a gig upstate New York to open the deli on time.
Well, hey, listen, I want to kind of piggyback back to something you said a second ago. When you're talking about your sister and losing that guy, obviously that affected you, affected your life, affected her,
sure,
right? you think losing the draft and like not seeing people that look like most of us has made people kind of go to sleep at the wheel the last 40, 50 years? Because I mean,
ending the draft was the government's way of easing the middle class out of the decision making process.
That's what I think too.
Yeah, no, because we were so. I think part of the reason we were growing up, we were as politically astute as we were threatened. We all could have gotten drafted.
Sure,
and we knew that, and so people went to college to keep an educational deferment. But even towards the end, those things started wearing through. But here's what interesting thing happened towards the end of the war, is the Pentagon no longer wanted to draft troublemakers.
Right.
I mean, all you had to do was go in there and like really make it clear that you had no intention of being part of that whole system.
Sure.
And they would just let you go. Only towards the end.
Well, and even I think it was in the Vietnam documentary, the Ken Burns thing. I think it was that somewhere else. I saw that Robert McNamara lowered the IQ. Requirement because he didn't want people asking a lot of questions.
Right.
So if you got the dumber kids in, they just do what they're told, and I don't know what they're going to do about officers, but as far as getting drafted, he lowered the IQ to cast a wider net, but to also have less troublemakers come in and start going, what the fuck are we doing here? What is it?
Oh yeah.
Sure. Because that's the challenge with war, pretty much since World War II, is pretty much every war except for maybe the Revolutionary War, War of 1812. I said World War II. Almost every war we've gotten into has been like undefinable goals, overblown or manufactured incidents to get us into it. The Lusitania in World War I, the Maine and Spanish American. So like when you guys, before you even knew that the Gulf of Tonkin was a false flag because it was being pitched as for real at that time, the evidence hadn't been out yet, I guess. But you guys had a sense, right, that something was wrong.
Yeah, I mean in those days, I mean, one of the things that's very different than they've totally closed down and sanitized was they used to, on the 11 o'clock news every night, there were pictures of the coffins coming off the planes.
Sure, I remember that.
Every night. And there you were, so you knew stuff was going wrong. And then, it just didn't make sense. And, then of course, like the like peace movement that grew, and John and Yoko were pretty much, they like by '68 they're putting billboards all over the place, and,
paying for it.
And they were, and most people, most of us, most kids, it was totally acceptable to fight the draft, to get out of the draft. And even our friends who were like right wingers, it was totally acceptable to us that they had bone spurs and stuff like that.
Sure.
I mean, you were doing whatever you could do to get out.
Right.
Now, unfortunately, like you were pointing out earlier, when we changed the history, there is people that think, and the military people that think the problem with the Vietnam War was we lost.
Right.
Not that we shouldn't have been there to begin with.
Right. Well, this is a point. I kind of always take notes as I'm talking to folks, and one of the things I wanted to bring up was the hagiography involved with John McCain and his passing. Right. He was captured and all that shit, but he was how many illegal bombing runs was he participating in, killing civilians before he got caught? And it sucked that he got caught and they broke his arms and everything else. But how many people did he kill before they caught him? Mm-hmm. And then he gets out, and he's full throated in support of the fucking war, pushing Nixon to keep going. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, how is it that you disconnect that much from humanity? And the way we talk about, I mean, I'm reading Chalmers Johnson book right now called Blowback. And
I read the book.
Yeah, it's like a second time go around, and one of the things he talks about is our imperialist attitude, where anybody brown or black, we already look at them as not being able to govern themselves, not being able to make any civil decisions, not being able to run their own society, that they need our help. Right. And our help always involves subjugating their people for 15 cents a day and no bathroom breaks and taking all their shit. And so it's kind of like, so now that we're here, right? Like, so what similarities do you see like today compared to, say, how we were in Vietnam? And by that, I sort of mean the brainwashing, the media. Like, do you see a lot of similarities, or is it? Are we worse now? Are we more?
I think then it was interesting. Is I think then you had greater. There was less. Of course, there was. Wasn't completely this way, but in the communities that we lived in, among our friends and stuff, we were. It was fine to have a pro-peace, anti-war, even anti-establishment point of view. Okay. In today's world, you can still have that, but I'll tell you, like I remember, like right after, in the aftermath of 9/11, when the Patriot Act first got passed there, I remember personally having the thought that I probably shouldn't speak so loudly against this war coming up. Even though I still did, I thought, isn't that, what kind of thought is that to have?
Yeah.
And I got 4 kids and stuff. I was always a little disappointed that my kids didn't take fighting against the wars more seriously.
Yeah.
Like when Iraq came, the first Iraq war came, I thought, how can this happen? I just did not believe the American people would fall for it.
And they did.
And they did completely, hook, line, and sinker, And then the second time around, and it was like, and you could see the lies fall. You could see the lies. It wasn't even like, like we knew that that stuff from Nigeria, the pipes was suspect to be at best.
100%. At best, yeah. Well, I remember back in the day when that was going down, and my dad's Arab, so I got a little bit of firsthand knowledge on some of this shit, and not that I'm some expert, but just I get to hear and see the stuff that most people don't. And I was like completely against the war, and people were like, "Well, what are you for, the terrorists?" I go, well, first of all, except for him paying a couple of Palestinian suicide bomber families, which were the only memos they found written in Arabic, that he paid some families $25,000 if a kid blew himself up in Tel Aviv. That was about it. Which is normal dictator terrorist shit. So like we're going to sit there and the 73% of dictators we support, we're going to invade all of them. So that was bullshit. Right. And the other part was what people refused to acknowledge, and not that I'm some genius, but again, because I'm not some genius, it should have been obvious, and it was obvious to those that did this. I kept saying Saddam Hussein is a cork on a shitty bottle of wine right now. You pull that cork, and the stench of sectarian differences are going to come up. The factions that he's been controlling, because he's been on them, it's going to be a mess. It's going to be Mad Max within 5 years. And sure enough, by 2008, it was a fucking disaster. And so now, with the same goddamn script, we went into Libya, into Syria, and now we're going into Venezuela. And I got people telling me with a straight face, well, those people need help. Humanitarian Humanitarian crisis is when you put 105 sanctions on a country, right? Or you steal their gold. Or Citgo, which I drove by on the way down here. Citgo is a Venezuelan company. They can't ship their profits to Venezuela. So we wonder why they're having a problem. They can't borrow money. They can't sell their shit overseas. So how are they supposed to?
No, listen, Saddam Hussein, the irony, back in 2004, that country was crippled due to U.S. sanctions. Yeah. We had their airspace closed down. We had everything. Yeah. There was nothing else for them. We were just slowly choking him out.
Absolutely. Over the 7-8 years of Clinton.
Right. Yeah. And for some reason, the neocons' philosophy was to get in there and change every, and regiment change, regime change. 100%. I like this Tulsi Gabbard because I think she tells it, the way she sees it, and she's got enough street cred that she's been in a couple of wars.
I trust anybody's been shot at. I trust anyone's been shot. If they're coming back going, that being shot at shit sucks. There's your bumper sticker. Being shot at sucks. But no, she and the one thing I appreciate about her, some people gave her some shit, but one thing I appreciate about her is I've seen her on a couple of news shows, and man, she doesn't cave.
No,
because her attitude's like, what? I'm on The View. Fuck you guys. I've been shot at. And, she must be like in this. Any vet that I've known that's come back from that, the real ones, not some guy who did kitchen detail on a fucking boat, but real guys have been shot at. They don't talk about it.
No.
Like the few guys I know, I remember my buddy's dad, about 20, 25 years ago. He was an airline pilot for American, and so every time he'd fly into LAX. He'd go to my buddy's house in Venice, and we'd all meet him down there and play poker and drink whiskey all night. And we knew he was a pilot during the war.
Right.
And man, I swear to God, we couldn't get 5 years play poker with this guy.
Right.
Maybe 3 or 4 or 5 times a year. Hey, Mr. Wright, can you? Just a lot of things happen. That's all you got out of him. And then this other guy that I used to know at this coffee place I went to, he had no front teeth, and he used to have this mustache to kind of cover up the fact that he had no front teeth. Kind of a biker dude, but really cool guy. So we were kind of like regulars at this one coffee joint. So I'd see him, we'd shoot the shit. And I knew he was in Vietnam. And I couldn't get it. And finally, one day, we went over to this dive bar around the corner called the Buccaneer, where they had $3 whiskey sodas. So I kind of apply him with a couple of whiskey sodas. And I go, dude, how was that? And he goes, well, I'll tell you a story. And it was a funny story, which is the only reason why he told me this story. So apparently he was on a little boat kind of like Apocalypse Now, like a little PT boat, and they're getting shot at. And they're freaking out. Like, Mayday, Mayday, and like yelling their positions. Nothing but dead, like, all of a sudden, you get this really stoned voice on the air. And the guy goes, what the fuck, over? And it's an F-16 pilot. And he's stoned. And the guy's all, Mayday, Mayday. He's all right, man. Okay, just hang tight. And all of a sudden, both sides of the river light up like a barbecue.
Wow.
And then they fly off, and it's gone. And that's the only reason why that guy told that story was because what the fuck over is a great punchline.
right. That's funny.
Otherwise, and he didn't talk about deaths he saw. He didn't talk about flaming dudes. He just talked about the F-16 guy who was obviously stoned and flying a jet at 600 miles an hour.
I had a good buddy of mine back in the 80s. And this guy's named Mark Baker. Mark wrote... He wrote the first book, Cops, that the TV show was loosely based on. Right. And then he wrote his second book. He wrote a book called Nam. And in both books, he did them sort of Stud Terkel style, where he interviewed 100 people. He interviewed 100 people, and then he would take their stories and intersperse them. Wow. And Nam was just a genius book about, like, he has a chapters of what it was like to arrive, what it was like once you were there, what it was like when you were leaving, and some of those. And so the very fact that he got a bunch of solid vets to tell him stories was pretty amazing.
That's amazing.
And he did the same thing with Cops, with his cop story. But but anyway, it was fun for me to get to know this guy because I got to see how the publishing world worked a little bit too.
Sure.
But the one thing I'll say, going back to the Iraq War, and where I can remember the day they were voting on that. I was watching C-SPAN, and like politician after politician voted in favor of giving the president the say-so over what would happen in the war.
Right.
And only a few, were stood up and said, no, I vote against it. Yeah. I watched one of the Kennedys give a talk about it.
Yeah, Barbara Lee.
Barbara Lee, right. Yeah. And and it was to me, it was so disturbing to watch. I think, for me, with the political parties, when Clinton showed up, I knew it was over. Mm. I just didn't trust that guy as far as I could, just watching him on TV and, and then, his like Slick Willie, this and that. And then I didn't inhale. I mean, what kind of crap. Yeah. So where are we going to go with a leader that, and obviously what we've seen them do is just, is get wealthy.
Right.
Doing something that,
Well, people forget that the Clinton Foundation was started to pay for his goddamn legal fees. And they came out of the White House $10 million in debt. And now, 18 years later, they're worth $250 million. That's some turnaround. That's some fucking turnaround. Yeah, there's just some good work in that goddamn nonprofit shit, right? Yeah. And I'm sitting there kind of like, and people want to sit there and ask me, like, oh, you're a conspiracy theorist. I'm like, well, there's conspiracy theory, and then there's conspiracy fact. If you look at 2 weeks after the election, why did 21 countries drop out of the Clinton Global Initiative 2 weeks after the election? Because she was done. And then 3 months later, Donald Trump's daughter gets $100 million from the Saudis and her nonprofit as soon as he approves that first weapons deal. Mm-hmm. What a coincidence that they had $100 million to donate to her nonprofit, but not any more money to give to the Clinton Foundation.
Oh yeah,
right. It's like it's maddening. And what's maddening is that you said a second ago, we used to have an anti-war, pro-peace party, and now we don't have an anti-anything party. These guys are just basically like the nicer wing of the oligarch party.
Yeah. That's all it looks. That's the way it looks to me, and that's all sad because they keep robbing everyday folks of their initiative.
Sure.
To get out there and vote, to get out there and campaign for stuff. It's like, and it's hard to know whether we're really going to wrest power back. People are really going to. We'll see. We'll see what happens over the next 10 years.
Look, you've seen a lot. You've been all over the world. I mean, what do you see like as a and not immediate. I hate that word. Like, hey, what's a fast heal? But like,
no, the kids.
Yeah,
it's the next generation.
Got to be right.
It's my grandkids.
Yeah,
it's up to them. I mean, because we've already shined it on.
Yeah,
and that's how it looks to me. It's like, you look at these kids who are like the Parkland survivors.
Right.
Their voice matters now.
Right.
I got I got a 13-year-old granddaughter who she led the march. She led her middle school's march.
Shit.
Last year, 2 weeks after Parkland or a month after.
Wow.
And she gave us a short talk and she and her friends did a presentation on it.
Wow.
And they know what they're doing. I mean, they're smart, they're young, they're sharp.
Yeah.
And also, like, you saw this whole, like, the young people, the high schoolers climate initiative that's just going on. And they're all marched out of school last week. And, and that's it. I mean, who else? I mean, it's going to be economic pressure. It's going to be, but the good news with these kids is, a lot of them, they're a lot smart.
And like, they give a shit. Like, I remember, because I got some guys I went to school with, some of them kind of conservative, and it just hit me right now. Like, we marched once in my whole high school. You know what we marched for? Our principal, he outlawed shorts on girls. True story, because they were wearing those cool little ditto shorts.
Oh yeah,
the cheeks are coming out, and we thought it was a violation of their First Amendment. That's what I looked at. Violation of the First Amendment rights to self-expression. I went to the library for that one. I was very proud of myself. And me and a couple of guys got some petitions together, and we bunch of us marched out of around the school. But that was it. We weren't marching. Vietnam was already over, but we weren't doing anything.
Okay, this is a piece of trivia.
Yeah.
Okay, so the very famous protest song by the Buffalo Springfield.
Oh yeah.
For what it's worth, right?
Yeah.
So it's about a protest march.
Yeah.
And the protest march it's about was back in whatever year it was, 66 or 67. There was a local business people attempted to close the clubs on Sunset Strip early.
Yep.
And that's why these guys marched against it.
That's right.
So even though it's a very popular protest song,
right.
And it seems like it really it fits it all. It's about shorts. Yeah. It's about don't close the bars too early.
Don't close the bars too early. I can't get laid, you prick. Yeah, no. But that's the thing is, like, that's why I asked you, like, what similarities you see now and then, because we just. I don't know. And here's the thing. I don't even think if Americans on the whole know we lost in Afghanistan. We lost Iraq. We spent $7 trillion to lose in Iraq. We're losing Syria.
Most people don't know that we're bombing 7 countries.
Yeah.
Right. Most people they don't. I mean, they don't. Where do they get their news? And people tend to, from what I gather and what I see, is they tend to get their news in very. Like the Fox News people get all their news from Fox. The CNN people get all their CNN news. Mm-hmm. The MSNBC people do there. Then you got the people that are outside of that are seeking out, like more individuals. Sometimes ultra right wing,
right.
people. Sometimes more ultra, like what we would call left wing people.
Sure.
Like the Young Turks are out there, and of course. Abby Martin, who does some pretty good reporting on
real reporting. She's on the ground.
Yeah, she goes places.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah. She's been shot at,
and we've seen all that. We've seen all that reporting take a major hit with the being embedded with the troops and stuff. Mm-hmm. That's not real reporting anymore. That's you can tell a story. We're going to let you tell. We're going to feed you the story.
Right.
Every once in a while, it's gotten off the. Off the rails when Petraeus says something stupid.
Right. See, but that's the thing is, like, what frustrates me. It's like, okay, so between Vietnam and Iraq One, forget Grenada, forget Panama. Those were just whatever. It was like, I mean, we had the Marines bombed in Lebanon, and then 2 days later, Reagan goes into Grenada.
Right.
That's just a big. We got to flex our dick because we can't do it in the Middle East. Mm-hmm. Right.
Yeah.
And then Panama happens, which was completely illegal. And we invade a country because that guy is no longer serving our purpose. When he was serving our purpose, we were cool. In fact, we killed the first guy, Torritos, to get Noriega in there. Mm-hmm. And then when he stopped serving our purpose, we went and got him, and we killed 6,000 Panamanians to do it. I don't know how we're liberating anybody when you kill them.
Yeah.
So between Vietnam and the first Iraq War was like not a generation, but a long time. And so I'll forgive people for getting faked out by that. But then between Iraq and Afghanistan, I mean, I figured for sure people would see the writing on the wall, because by the time Iraq 1 was over, we already figured out that the chick talking about the dead babies on the incubator floors or whatever was lying. Mm-hmm. She was, coached by a publicity firm, public relations firm.
Yeah, she was staged. It was totally staged.
Totally staged. She was the daughter of a Kuwaiti ambassador to America. So it's like, when do we start? I mean, is it how is it that people could just go to sleep and not give a shit how our money is spent? Excuse me, number one, and then number two, where we send our kids into harm's way for what? They're not defending us.
I mean, yeah. A couple of things is that the people who are sending their kids into harm's way are tending to be the people that are still buying the patriotic myth. and a patriotic story. So they're so they feel good that their kids are joining the service, and maybe they have a tradition in their family and stuff like that. But I mean, after the 9/11 incidents, the people who were willing to, in the rush of patriotism, sign on. I mean, we had more, we had a lot of people willing to volunteer for the Marines and the Army.
Absolutely.
And the Air Force.
Pat Tillman from the Arizona Cardinals. Absolutely.
Right. So when we went into, so Afghanistan was first, but you could even make you could make a case for that. The people running the military-industrial complex didn't want the gravy train to end. And so and we've been at war now for
going on 18 years.
18 years. I mean, you got kids who were born today who don't know what it's like for the United States not to be at war.
Right. And they're
which is crazy.
And they're old enough now to fight in Afghanistan.
And they're old enough
if their old man was in Afghanistan, they're now old enough to fight in the same war.
Yeah.
That's the first time in U.S. history.
Yeah.
And in a couple of years, Iraq's next.
Yeah.
And then pretty soon it'll be, Libya. And then, whatever. It's like.
And and there's no, I mean, we've, like when you pointed out earlier, we've destabilized things so terribly that restoring order, I mean, I don't even know how you go about doing it. I don't even know where you start.
I mean, this is a naive question. What if we just pulled out and let them fend for themselves and throw some UN money at them or IMF
At some point, we're actually going to have to do that. If you go back and you look at I read this book. You'd love this book. I read it in the '80s called "A Quick and Dirty Guide to War." And these two guys, they were military guys. They went back and they went back to World War II and they investigated every conflict that existed. And they went around the whole world and told about potential conflicts and this and that. One of the things they said about Afghanistan, this was written in about 86, 87, where in the Soviet Union was in the midst of bankrupting itself.
Absolutely.
Over Afghanistan.
That's right.
And one of the things they said that nobody has ever conquered Afghanistan. I mean, people have had short-term victory only to be undermined by insurgencies, and because because these kids are up in the mountains and they can shoot some lame old rifle 500 yards. I mean, they're that's who they are. That's what they are, and they're defending their territory, their country. So now, we're just among the next group of empire builders who are not able to conquer Afghanistan.
Well, it's like that. It's like one of my favorite films is The Princess Bride, and one of my favorite lines in that movie, and I think they should just show this at West Point. Solve a lot of problems. Never get in a land war in Asia.
Right.
It's like we seem to always get in a fucking land war in Asia since about the Spanish-American War.
Yeah.
And we didn't even get into Asia, like West Asia, like Japan, the Philippines, all that stuff. That's not India. That's not Afghanistan. That's not Iraq. Right. That is Asia. Kyrgyzstan, all those places, all the stands, right? That's Asia, and nobody wins there.
Nobody wins there.
Nobody fucking wins there. I mean,
there's also not that much to win.
Yeah.
It's not really worth it. I mean, it's
you're only winning if you want to go up Russia's ass, then you're winning because all those countries border Russia, and pretty soon we're going to turn them into NATO nations too. It's like seriously, and this is the other thing, like. We got some time left. But one of the points I want to ask you about too is just, like with all this Mueller report stuff, and I see these people like trying to bounce back with, he is a puppet. How is he a puppet when he has expanded NATO? He does war games on the Russian border. Trump is still doing war games on the Russian border with the new NATO countries, Mauritania and all these places. He's imposed more sanctions since Obama did in 2014. He's imposed more sanctions the last 2 years. Russia's off the dollar. They've cashed in 84% of U.S. debt. How is Trump a government puppet of the Putin presidency? And people keep fighting on this thing. And again, it's like WMDs. For 2.5 years, this country's been in a brand new Cold War over the fact that Hillary Clinton could not beat an orange game show host. Right? And instead of accepting reality, it's like they keep pushing the goalposts. They keep moving the goalposts back, and it's like, oh, well, we recovered all this tax money. Well, fuck you. That wasn't what the point was. You get the IRS to do that. I don't need an FBI guy, by the way, who's a fucking spook. By the way, okay, in your generation, did you trust the FBI or the CIA?
No.
And all of a sudden now, the so-called left embraces these motherfuckers.
I don't get it.
Like he's a hero, and Robert De Niro's playing on Saturday Night Live, which has basically become a glorified DNC Klan rally. It used to be funny, it used to be comedy, and now it's just like, De Niro comes out doing Mueller. I'm like, what is he woke to? He's in his 70s. He didn't know Vietnam. He didn't know Nixon. He didn't know Reagan. All of a sudden now he gives a shit about politics? No. That stuff drives me bananas. I mean, so like...
Oh, I know.
So,
I know.
Like,
yeah, no, you have a great point there. And it's, it's all, so much of it's crazy. And the people fight for the ideology now.
Right.
That not for what they believe in.
Right.
I mean, their ideology is formulated for them almost. It's like, it's so weird. And, a couple of things you talked about was like you said this earlier, there's no longer a peace party. There's no longer,
right.
It doesn't exist anymore.
Right.
Although, like you go back to Tulsi Gabbard for a second, that's the message she's singing. She's saying, like, we're going to, the chances of her being elected are very, very, very slim, obviously. She's...
Well, let's back up. The chances of her getting nominated, if she got elected or nominated, she would get elected.
That's a good possibility.
I think she could beat Trump.
Right.
But the DNC would prefer the corporate money.
Right.
So they're gonna fob Joe Biden on me and say that he's like a front runner. I'm like, who the fuck are you polling that gives a shit about Joe Biden? The guy who wrote, by the way, the guy who wrote the Patriot Act in 1994. Is it a coincidence that a week after 9/11, we have a 3,000-page document just like that? Amazing. Amazing that we could do that in a week. No, it's been sitting there. And then he had a couple of little augmentations, and then Patriot Act 2 pretty much gave the president permission. If you think Al-Qaeda's there, you can do whatever the fuck you want. Because everyone forgets that Congress told Obama he could not go into Syria. And then he went into Syria anyway because he just said Al-Qaeda, the magic words. According to the Patriot Act 2, I can say Al-Qaeda. And that's what he did. And now we're there 8 years.
Yeah.
You know?
Oh, I know. It's crazy.
I mean, because the so-called left at this point, and I want you to kind of tell me what you think of this statement. I mean, you said it a second ago. We don't have a peace party anymore. We don't have a protest party anymore. We've got this pseudo-nice party that pays fealty to these manufactured problems of political correctness and multiculturalism, which without social and economic justice doesn't mean shit. Martin Luther King said that. Not quite the way I said it, but he even said that. So now it's like, oh, gee whiz, I got a multicultural Taco Bell. Awesome, right? Yeah. But nothing's being better. Nothing's being made better. I mean, so how do you see, when you talk to these friends of yours on the left that say they're on the left, and they try to pay lip service to this happy horseshit.
Here's what I think. I think a lot of those folks really essentially, like for example, I grew up in New York, right? I lived in New York for a long time, and my second wife is an actor/writer, and all of her acting and writing friends are all liberals, right? And they tend to be, even like New York liberals, which makes them sort of a. When I lived downtown, I lived in fact, across the street from De Niro in 1990 to 1995 down in Tribeca. And there was a time when Clinton ran and this and that. And I've always just have a BS detector for people like Clinton. And so I was like, I don't know about at that point in time, I didn't believe that the Democratic Party really stood for much anymore. Okay. Now, and in some ways, not that they ever really did, because like you talked about the FBI before and this and that. I mean, we were, I was a teenager and Johnson was the president. Right. And Johnson was as far as we were concerned, he was a dirtbag.
Absolutely.
And then I was walking down the street in San Francisco when this hippie guy tells me that he had just heard on the news that J. Edgar Hoover had died. And we're high-fiving each other.
Fuck yeah, you are.
That's what we're doing. We're high-fiving each other because we knew what an evil mother the guy was.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so the hippie left and the civil right left, both of the hippie left was tended to always move away from real political statements and then went back to like partying. I mean, just to be honest about it. And I'd fall in that category a bunch of times. Where's the concert? Where's the show? What are we doing next? What do you got? But the civil rights left was much more, old school and had a stronger foundation.
Sure.
Now some of that bounded together, and but so much of it, once Vietnam helped like sort of centered all of those people together.
Sure.
After that, it got fractured a lot.
Yeah.
And you never really saw, like the next time the peace movement really came together strongly was when with the first Gulf War.
Right, I saw
and,
that.
you know, and I mean, I went to Washington. I actually went to Washington with my kids. I think all 4 of my kids came with me. And we marched, and it was send Neil Bush, send Dan Quayle.
Yeah.
No, send George Bush, send Dan Quayle, send Neil Bush when he gets out of jail.
Yeah.
That was but that particular, that was short-lived, and that war was over in no
2
time
months
at all.
Yeah.
But, a buddy of mine, he said, that war, he goes, that was just like a trade show.
Absolutely.
That was what you just witnessed was a trade show for future wars.
That's right.
And I went, whoa! And then after, when he said it, I didn't get it. But down the road, I got it.
Yeah.
And the military-industrial complex has grown beyond its. I mean, look at the stuff with Boeing last week. Mm-hmm. Everybody else in the world closes down those type of planes, except for not the U.S. Why? Mm-hmm. Because we're essentially, Boeing is one of those companies we're just in bed with.
We're beholden to. Yeah.
Boeing, Raytheon, and these are the people that are making the bombs, that are killing people around the world, and then we wonder why people are mad at the Yankees.
Yeah. Well, that's it. No one asked the question, right? So, because I remember when the Iran thing happened in '79, I was like 15, and I didn't know.
Right.
My old man's like going, well, it's just Mohammed Mossadegh. That's why. And Shah's a butcher, and he's a bastard. I'm like, and I didn't want to believe what he was saying.
Right.
He said it with an Arab accent. It was
sure.
You're a white kid trying to be American. It wasn't flying. But then, goddamn it, I get to college, and I got a poli-sci professor who starts teaching us this shit. And I'm going, shit, my dad was right. Mm-hmm. Start digging, reading. I'm going, fuck. So they were pissed for 26 years that this guy was running rampant. Mm-hmm. And here Jimmy Carter's taking, he's giving Nixon caviar, and Jimmy Carter's at parties going, he's my friend. He's this awesome, ally. He's keeping the Middle East stable. And the American people have no patience. 6 months before the Gulf War, Saddam was our guy.
Yeah.
He was our guy. For 10 years, he fought Iran for us. Even though we fucked him and sold them weapons to back the Contras, he was our guy.
I know.
And in 6 months, he's a Hitler. He's a Hitler of the desert. He's not unprecedented brutality. That George Bush nasally shit. Mm-hmm. And he pimped that Kuwaiti incubator story everywhere he went. They're taking babies out of incubators and they're throwing them on the floor. And we bought it. Hook, line,
it was amazing. Yeah.
And when your friend said, it was a trade show, honestly, Bill Hicks used to have this great bit about that. It's like, hit up G4. Well, it says here that it bombs everything, but the buildings and the fillings in their teeth help pay for the war effort. Pull up G12, see what that does. And it was like this, it was like a concert.
Yeah.
And then we saw it from far away. Remember that? They didn't show the.
Oh, I know.
I was like 12 in Vietnam, and I remember seeing on the news from about third, fourth grade when I started remembering stuff, and Dan Rather, somebody's out there, and they're pulling bodies out from in the background behind him. They bombed a hospital here, and there's all these dead people, and you're just like shit. And every night we saw that on the news, 5, 6 o'clock, 10, 11 o'clock, and by the time the Gulf War happened, I was like, me and my buddies were stoned, and we were watching it. And we're going, oh, we woke up. We're like, this is 1984 now. Mm-hmm. Now you're backed up. Now it looks like video games. Now it doesn't even look real. Now it's pretty. It looks like fireworks.
I know.
Yeah.
Some idiot one of the newscasters last year on one of the bombings that we've done in Syria.
Yeah.
Oh, the bombs are so beautiful. What the heck?
Fuck is that? Brian Williams did that last year when Trump sent bombs into Syria.
Yeah.
He practically.
Brian Williams.
Yeah. First of all, he was a liar about his own war involvement. Right. And he sits out for a year, and then he gets a job on MSNBC. And you're just going. And he said the same thing. He took a Leonard Cohen song, by the way.
Oh, right.
We're blinded by the beauty of our weapon. Well, you're really fucking misusing that song.
Yeah.
That is like taking a revolution and selling Nikes with it. John Lennon did not intend to sell Nikes with it. But man, well, listen, we're about a little bit out of time here. But listen, man, is there like a link or something you want folks to go to? Like what do you want to kind of leave with everybody?
I don't know. No, I don't really have any links to go to.
Well, you know what I'll do? I'll put the quick dirty guide to war.
That's a great book.
I'll put that link in
Donegan, James Donegan.
Yeah, and people can get that.
Yeah, and again, for everybody, it's just like, Mike, any closing statements, just pay attention and don't just buy the rhetoric that's out there. I mean, that's, because that's really the narrative that's being told to us as American people is being shaped by corporate America and by people that don't have your best interests at heart. They have their profits at heart, and that's all. Unfortunately, that's the driving force. I'm a businessman. I like profits,
sure,
but not at the expense of human beings and not at the expense of human life.
Yeah.
So.
Man. Well, folks, my guest has been Mike Melia, a world traveler, time traveler, man about the planet. Seriously, again, you could reach us on patreon.com/The Bitter Truth. If you listen to Stitcher or Spotify or Podcast Addict, you can catch us there, and again, at no charge. But if you want to support the show, that's always welcome. We got some new tiers coming out this year. And folks, as always, if this stuff makes you uncomfortable, it's supposed to, so sleep tight.